Jensen can only win in the server with some people. And what I mean by that is he can only win in the most literal sense when his team wins inside the game over a series or gets the championship and he is lifting the trophy. He doesn't get the acclaim he has earned, that I think he deserves, or quite frankly is appropriate to his accomplishments or just the greatness of his individual level of play. It reminds me as a result of a comment I remember hearing on the old StarCraft 2 talk show called State of the Game. And it was either Idra or Artosis, and it was one of those guys who followed the Korean Brood War scene, who when he was commenting on some of the old truly great Brood War players of the early 2000s, well, two of the big rivals, and the one that overtook the other, was the original god tier player was Boxer. Many of you heard of him even from StarCraft 2. And his rival and a guy who took over him later was a player called Nada, who later went on to win more championships. But if you ask people who's more influential, who's the bigger name, who's more beloved, it's actually Boxer with his 3 championships over the guy with 6 championships who broke all the records and to this day holds many of them. So his point when he was saying that for Boxer, he can win in many ways. He can win by being the most popular, having fan appeal, having acclaim among his peers, among the people who analyse the game. Obviously, he had championships. But if you're Nada, you can only win by just winning the championship. And if you want to win and you get more acclaim, you just have to win even more championships. And you have to just be the best no matter what, so that all the haters and the naysayers and the fans of the other guy, they can only eventually be forced to give it up in some sense. If you just beat him in terms of you just win more championships, you take whatever metrics they're using and you max them out, basically. So, quite frankly, I think the same goes for Jensen when we contrast him with his peer group. And who is his main peer and has been correctly for his entire career? It's, of course, Bjergsen, rival mid laner, right? He is the clear rival and peer of him when you consider where they've been in their careers. I mean, they're literally the same nationality. They have the same career storyline. You come over from Europe after not doing much there, you become a key central piece of a team in NA that builds the whole squad around you and tries to put the pieces there, and you're considered an MVP of the league. They were on rival teams their whole career. Cloud9 versus TSM, Team Liquid versus TSM. They literally contested the championship seemingly the whole time that they were playing in their careers. So it should, as a result, in a sane world or a world of adults with nuanced opinions, it should be an awesome discussion here, some debate about who do you think's better, who do you have, what criteria do you use to determine these things, how do we judge the period where one didn't have the championships and the other one did, where one had world success and the other. You could have so many interesting discussions about how we look at teams and role balance and what is more valuable in terms of as a supportive style that makes everyone better. Is it better to be individual? Oh, there's so many interesting discussions and videos and talk shows. But instead, we don't really get that, of course. Instead, when you contrast them together, you end up with this world where, I've pointed this out many times, absurd TSM bias, I think not just from things like Reddit and Twitter, etc., but it bleeds into broadcasts and content creation because people fear the downvotes. People fear being told they're a hater, that they don't know anything about the game, and that includes broadcast people. That's why they've all flipped out so much when they were called TSM chat stuff. They just wig out. They can't handle it. They can't handle that. People are going to call you biased because you are biased to your opinion, your principles, and your way of breaking the game down. So you are biased. Embrace it. Understand that your bias comes from your drive and your desire to understand the game, the work you've put in. And so yes, a guy who knows nothing, who's just a random gold player who happens to have a TSM and more, yeah, he should think you're biased. That shows you're in the right path, by the way, guys. Yes, if someone if someone big who's followed the game for a long time comes out and says you're biased, now you might have something to consider. That person doesn't have the same impetus or motivation to call you biased, but certainly should. So what I want to do is show in this video how TSM bias not only has ruined these discussions, but it's totally mischaracterized players to an extent that one of them cannot ever overtake the other, even when he meets all the same criteria by which the previous player who was considered the best was given all his status. So what happens is, people act as though, when you compare the two, it's not a comparison, is it? Bjergsen's up here towering over Jensen, and Jensen can never catch up. And as a result, even though, quite frankly, this should be a scenario where the two players are very comparable right now. They're really close. It depends which metrics you're using. Instead, everything's automatically skewed Bjergsen's way, and he just gets everything. So this recent All-Pro vote is what really made me think of this, and I think it's a great example. Because if you haven't followed this and you haven't thought it through, Bjergsen is in the Cloud9 Jensen position now, where he doesn't have the better teammates necessarily. He's not on the better team, and he's not favoured to win, but he's playing exceptionally at times individually. So people want to give him the award. loudest that they would never give to Jensen when Jensen was that player, had less team help for his team, was on a worse team overall, but was playing exceptional individually and in a number of metrics better than Bjergsen. But he was never allowed to win because Bjergsen's team won and Bjergsen's team was higher placed. And so all the criteria that went in Bjergsen's favour then somehow goes in Bjergsen's favour when he's in the corresponding opposing position. This is whack. This is no way to characterise people. The disrespect and contempt for not only history, but your own arguments here is so saddening, especially then when I see it bleed into broadcast people or other coaches and players taking up the same behaviour. This is whack. So in terms of that all-pro thing, there has always been a bias towards how you perform at the end of the split. And certainly Bjergsen was very strong at the end of the split, even quite frankly when TSM were losing some of the games. I mean, he really was just a better player in some of those matches. But he also had some games early in the split and in the middle that either they were like average performances or lackluster, or he picked into a supportive pick that couldn't help the team, or he just didn't have a great pick that he couldn't do anything on. By the way, you don't get points in an MVP race. Well, he couldn't do anything on that champion. Why are you picking it then? Why is your team picking it for you? Someone like a Jensen wouldn't have gotten credit for that if he'd have played some stupid Scion mid shit 3 years ago, right? It wouldn't go, well, that doesn't count against his MVP. Of course it does. Every performance counts. So in contrast, Jensen is clearly one of the best mids of the entire split. Like anyone who doesn't have him top 2, I think you're either trolling or you have some malicious reason to go against Jensen, or some bizarre emotional connection to Bjergsen that you must somehow push Jensen out of the equation, as scumbags like Treats and that TSM coach did, where they didn't even pick him top 2. And instead they picked players like Jizuke or Power of Evil or Niski as their number 1 fucking mid laner in the LCS because they're scum. That's what happens when you're involved with these organisations. I used to say it's not on the players or the staff there, it's just Reginald, it's just some topic. No, I actually see now with the whole Lenovo double-lift thing, with this all for pro voting now, generally how they turn hate from their fans on other people. It's actually just a bad organisation. It's got bad people involved in it. And when you place yourself around bad people who engage in bad faith actions, you eventually, some of it will start to rub off on you. You'll think that's cool. You think that's all right. You'll think it's fun to just troll an MVP award vote when your guys won 1 million MVPs and the guy who rightfully, this should be his time to shine, doesn't get to have one because you didn't even put him top 2. That's apparently fair and justifiable behaviour. And what's going to happen to those people? Nothing, because Riot doesn't give a fuck and they never have. Hence why they have absolute joker hacks, news poster scum fuck hacks who just repost other people's news. They get an MVP vote. They get an all-pro vote. This is a fucking joke of a system. So let's contrast that. Jensen was clearly one of the best mids of the split. His team is higher placed and was for most of the split. He is the only carry player on his team who can be relied upon to carry and to dominate his lane. His AD carry and his top laner arguably weren't even the best in their role in the league. Both players are fairly dodgy junglers. I'll give that up to both of them in that sense. Jensen did have a monster support in terms of Core JJ, but Core JJ only did that on occasion in terms of, I might vote him the MVP myself, but if we're talking about like roles, you had double lift if you were Bjergsen. Everyone might laugh at him after this like quarterfinals performance or upper bracket semi-finals, I guess it'd be called, but over the split, he was still one of the better players generally. I think he was a pretty good player. He wasn't as good at his role as Core JJ was. So I have no issue if you just want to debate it. If you make your case for Bjergsen, someone makes their case for Jensen, we can have a great discussion like I said. My problem is that people have made it so it's not debatable and that you just choose Bjergsen anyway, and then every factor that would have gone for Jensen in the past suddenly goes for Bjergsen, and all the factors that would have gone for Bjergsen in the past now don't count in favour of Jensen. This is just so whack. So let's consider for a second how disingenuous this is, because it's the context that people are arguing that's bothered me on this. Because I feel as though they've characterised this rivalry, these players, in a way that is so disingenuous, and it just shows how ultimately you don't have an eye test. You're not doing it based on what you actually think. You just pick based on whoever you like and whoever you prefer, whether or not they actually played better or whether or not your previous arguments are even consistent. So let's consider for a second when it was TSM Bjergsen and C9 Jensen. So Bjergsen had the better teammates. Every all-pro vote that you all did implied as much, and nobody talked about that, right? Nobody ever mentioned that Bjergsen had the better team. Of course they didn't. Nobody even mentioned that he was fucking beating Jensen while he had double lift, an MVP candidate. I think sometimes better than Bjergsen in those splits. But no, because TSM, the team, won, that meant that Bjergsen was better than Jensen because he beat him and he won the title. So now along comes Jensen. He gets on a Team Liquid and he starts winning the championship. You know what? Sometimes TSM isn't even in the final playing against him. Same scenario, right? But all of a sudden, that's because you've got Core JJ at the moment and you had double lift back then. And you know what? Smithy's the best job. Like, there's a million million reasons. Again, magically, Jensen doesn't get to be better. In fact, suddenly his titles don't even count, it seems. Then, consider back when it was Bjergsen versus Doublelift. When Doublelift was on CLG, he hadn't got his championships yet, and Bjergsen was on TSM, and they were the main rivals before Jensen was even a thing, right? People used to cite that Season 4 Worlds run where TSM get out of their group, no Korean team, that one of their main rivals literally had a player banned for half the split. And they get to the top 4 and they get smashed by the eventual winners. That used to be considered a good performance for Bjergsen and used to count like on his resume, which it does, but in the most minor sense ever if you've seen what other great Western players have accomplished internationally. So then we come to a world where when it's Bjergsen and Jensen, who've been rivals the whole time, it was pretty much never mentioned for some bizarre reason when everyone said Bjergsen was better, that the entire time Jensen was outplacing Bjergsen at Worlds. Every single year. As in when Jensen doesn't get out of groups, well, I mean, TSM don't even qualify. Jensen has been in the quarterfinals 3 times, and one of those times he went to the semi-finals. Bjergsen has nothing comparable to that. He has the IEM World Championship, which unfortunately for him, he didn't have to play the better teams because of the way the bracket went. So he gets a performance. I'd put that's maybe comparable to a quarters at Worlds or something, but it's nothing insane. So for every other player in the LCS, international accomplishments are boasted about all the time. They're a huge primary criterion for most people in terms of going in favour or against a player. Not always for me, they are a criterion, but if you saw my list, I put it way down there. So when it's Doublelift, everyone, TSM fans included, were memeing on him. Oh, he's never made it out of groups at Worlds. He's fucking shit. Like, that proves he's overrated. Like, don't overclass him in that sense. People even used to argue Sneaky was better as a result, but somehow that doesn't apply to Jensen. But Bjergsen's allowed to just fail every year. Sometimes not even qualify. But Jensen goes to Worlds every year and then sometimes makes it out of groups and sometimes even beats a Korean team 3-0 in a fucking best-of-5 series. But that doesn't count, does it? That doesn't make him a great player. Would if Bjergsen did that, apparently. So I myself, I go off the eye test. I go off individual play. That's where I determine who the better player is. Then I contextualize it by the strength of their teammates, how much have they played around, etc. That's why I agree with the fans to some degree that I didn't count Jensen's TL mid-wins as crazy as people thought when he won the championship, because I didn't think he was the best player in the team. But the point is, Bjergsen got that status no matter what, no matter who he was playing with, and it's taken for granted. People don't even need to feel like they have to look into it. So from whether it was Froggen versus Bjergsen in the past to Jensen versus Bjergsen now, well, here's the problem, right? When I said Bjergsen doesn't even make it to Worlds, hasn't won in ages, hasn't had any performances at Worlds because he hasn't even been there, let's think about when it was Froggen, Bjergsen and Jensen versus that. So when those players, Froggen and Jensen, had the worst teammates, what people did was they countered that obvious point that, like, well, how can you say he's better just keep winning because he has better teammates, by spinning the other way and going, well, what they do, same as when it was Xpeke versus Froggen, is because Xpeke and Bjergsen are such great people, they're such great players, they have like a magnetic quality about them, their charisma, where people just want to come and play with them, and that's why they get better teams. So basically, they are better people and players, and then that translates to better teammates, and therefore they win, therefore they were the best players. Okay, I don't agree with that, but let's establish that premise for a second. Right now, then, you must apply that now to Jensen, then. You must apply that to Doublelift when he wasn't in the same team as Bjergsen. So if you think that Bjergsen has worse teammates now than Jensen, that's a point for Jensen in your cosmology, just as it should have been when he was on Team Liquid before, and it was Doublelift and Jensen against Bjergsen. I think Dom's point about the TSM sub is so key to bring in here as context, because these are the same people making these arguments against people like Jensen, which is every split starts out like this. The fans are all there. Reggie's done it. I think this is a sleeper pick up the Smaker guy. He could get this together. I like the coaching change. Bjergsen and Doublelift got a style and everyone. They love it. They love all the players. They think it's all good. They think they're going to win finally. They're going to show people like Jensen and they're overrated. Like, good luck with tactical. They're all that sort of shit. Then they get a few best of ones and a little bit of a streak. They start crowing. I think we could be better than them. Team Liquid, they're not even the second best in the league. Go on to, of course, win the regular split. And then what happens? The second they lose in the playoffs, just like they did in this upper bracket, suddenly everyone sucks from the same people. Only Bjergsen's good, Parth's an idiot, Reggie should unironically fire most of the team, and it's all constructed to stop the house of cards about Bjergsen ever falling down. Now here's the funny thing, if you want to come to my world, I, of course, think Bjergsen is fantastic. I don't think he was pretty much to blame at all for that series that they just lost now. He's one of the best players in the entire LCS, just as Jensen was back then. And the fact that Doublelift played like shit against Golden Guardians doesn't count against Bjergsen. So why the fuck do all those past results where you had washed up Sneaky, etc., why does that count against Jensen? Why does it count when he doesn't have a proper jungler? And you have a guy who later on, when Bjergsen was beating Jensen, he was doing it with a guy who later became the fucking MVP of the league as a jungler. Homie, let me know when that ever happens to a player that Jensen plays with. Just let me know. So in this kind of scenario, this is my problem. I think you can have an awesome debate on this topic. I'd love to actually do it. But you can't if people here just wave their banner, and that cannot be changed, what is written on that banner, no matter the evidence or the actual play of the players. In fact, this reminds me, as a quick tangent, of why I used to think, because I used to check back in on European soccer every now and then, see what are the discussions going on. And I have been so underwhelmed by the public and even the expert discussion of the Messi versus Ronaldo discussion. Because that should have been one of the truly great, like Magic versus Bird style, like these two great players, Gretzky versus Lemieux, the great discussions about who's better and why and what era did they play in and what team. And instead, every time I ever checked in on it, it was utterly worthless, especially fan-wise. Because here's how it went, and you're about to see the contrast between the TSM fans and the Messi fans. So when Messi was winning everything with Barcelona in the 2000s, and early 2010s, and he was winning everything as a team, and he was getting the individual award as the best player, the Ronaldo fans were like, all right, I still think it's a debate, I still think I like my guy, but you know what, fair enough, we have to give it up, he does win that award, his team did win, so for now, since most people use team criteria as a success as a criteria rather, yeah, we give it up to him. So then Ronaldo's time came and he was winning everything as a team and he was winning the Golden Boot and he was setting his records like Messi had set his own records. And what happened? Did the Messi fans give it up and go, well, you know, your guys, but no, they all just hated, said he wasn't the best, like none of that shit counts, his team's just better and all he can do is score goals anyway, and he just glory supports and goes to different teams so he has a new chance to win every time. For Messi, it counted for him that he stayed and was loyal. Well, then why didn't he just build Barcelona back up again? Why wasn't he just winning the whole time? The logic is never consistent. So essentially, they metaphorically moved the goalposts, which is what I non-stop see with Jensen. Fuck it, just look at when Doublelift left Team Liquid. Suddenly Jensen's a piece of shit and a traitor because he didn't stand up for Doublelifting because he agreed, I had to see someone to go. Not even true, apparently. Apparently all he did was ask for his input. He said, I didn't think Doublelift played that great, and I think Tactical had these reasons for him, and here's the pros and cons. Now, let me ask you this. That's supposedly because Doublelift defended Jensen after Worlds. Right, so when Bjergsen just sat back and let Doublelift get kicked, was he not a traitor then? Did Doublelift not help him win a bunch of championships? Oh, that's weird. What about when Doublelift played like shit at Worlds? Did Bjergsen come out and defend Doublelift and do all that sort of thing? And obviously, no, I thought not. Okay, so why is Bjergsen not a traitor? Because you just like Bjergsen and you just dislike Jensen. It's obvious at this point in time. So if you're Jensen, don't worry, this is the only way you can win, but that really is the only one that counts as well. The rest is just people's opinions. As I once told Hauntzer when I didn't think he was the best top laner, and by the way, that's aged like fucking fine wine, and I thought instead someone like Someday was better, I told Hauntzer privately, listen mate, all you can do is play the game. So if you win the championship and you lift that trophy, believe for yourself whatever you need to believe. What my opinion won't matter in that sense. It's just a guy's opinion online. You get to hoist the trophy. So I'd say the same thing to Jensen. If you're Jensen, just keep giving it to him in the fucking server, homie. People like me will write up your history fairly and will make arguments against the bullshit consensus like I do now. But there will always be what I call anti-thinkers. They just decided that they like a guy, or they've decided this guy's going to be better no matter what evidence or individual play or what displays go to the contrary. But you can't control that, so you just got to do you.
This is LS, and you're on Thorin's YouTube channel, so cut the Western shit.
This video was kindly supported by Pronogo, Whattathings, Spencer Green, Soliko, Dean Tanglis, Jack Hanna, Hades, Jensen Goh, the Puyallup Tribe, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to put a question to me in my monthly video AMA. Do you want teasers for my upcoming content? Or maybe to even take part in an online esports discussion with moi? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.